A Girard Municipal Court judge is stepping aside from the case involving Trumbull County Common Pleas Court Judge Ronald Rice. Judge Jeffrey Adler recused himself from the cases involving Rice, citing the possible appearance of impropriety and a desire to promote the public's confidence in the judiciary. His decision means the Ohio Supreme Court will be asked to appoint a different judge to oversee the proceedings. Rice pleaded not guilty on Monday to charges stemming from a rollover crash in Vienna Township. He refused to take a breathalyzer test, which we're told cannot incriminate him in court. He's now facing a felony charge of improperly handling a firearm in a vehicle and misdemeanor charges of OVI and failure to control. So here with more on this, our legal expert, attorney Matt Mangino. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So police say Judge Rice refused to take a breathalyzer test at the scene of the crash. Can you tell me how common is someone charged with DUI after refusing that test?
Well, it's not unusual. It happens quite a bit because you have what's called implied consent. When you get your driver's license, you agree that if the police suspect you're under the influence, that you will submit to a blood test or a breathalyzer test. And if you refuse that, sometimes the penalties for refusing it can be worse than actually the OVI charge, because your license is automatically suspended for 1 year as a result of your refusal.
Does it carry any implications with it moving forward?
Well, from a defense standpoint, if you were going to try this case, ultimately that blood test would not, or breathalyzer test would not be there available to show the blood alcohol content of the operator of the vehicle. So merely having a high blood alcohol content is enough to convict you of OVI, even if they haven't observed you driving dangerously or crossing the center line and all those sort of things that happen when you're pulled over. So that could aid the defense, because you don't have that evidence that automatically would categorize you as someone driving under the influence.
Now, Matt, when this case goes before a jury or a judge, how would prosecutors be able to use that refusal of the test in court?
Well, my understanding in Ohio is that it is not necessarily able to be used against you as some sort of consciousness of guilt. For instance, in Pennsylvania, if you refuse a blood test, you can in fact use that evidence in court to show consciousness of guilt, that the person charged did not want to take the blood test because they believed they might be under the influence of alcohol.
Now, the initial judge in this case recused himself. So what sort of decision will the judge who takes his place eventually have to weigh when it comes to trying this case?
Well, obviously, it's like anybody else who's charged with driving under the influence or OVI. The state has to prove the operator of the vehicle was under the influence to a degree that made them incapable of safe driving. And they have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's no different than any other burden in a criminal case. And so, without having a breathalyzer, that is somewhat of a disadvantage for the prosecution. The fact that he wasn't observed driving erratically, but there was an accident, is obviously going to be used against him. And what the officers perceived at the scene, bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, unsteady gait. Those are all things that the prosecution will use in a trial in a case like this.
Now, Rice is also facing, as you know, a felony charge of improperly handling a firearm in a vehicle. What kind of sentence could this carry, and could this result in his removal from the bench?
Well, if a judge is convicted of a felony in Ohio, chances are there's going to be some action to remove them from the bench. But that's not the only potential consequence of being convicted of a felony. You're also potentially facing disciplinary action as an attorney, because you could lose your license with a felony conviction. You could get a suspension, a short suspension, or an indefinite suspension. And in Ohio, a number of times we have seen judges removed from the bench because of felony convictions and ultimately disbarred from practicing law.
All right. We'll have to keep an eye on this case. Matt Mangino, thank you so much always for your legal expertise.
Thank you.